I'm sure you've had the experience of attending a meeting that you thought was pretty boring or mundane. Lord knows I have. But have you ever had a meeting in a box?
What essentially it turned out to be in terms of application was a 20-minute module that would be used to augment some team monthly meeting that would focus on CX.
A look at a creative way to make certain all of your employees are synchronized in your CX efforts on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Walker, the host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. On the CX Leader Podcast, we explore topics and themes to help leaders like you leverage all the benefits of your customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. In this episode, we're going to speak to a CX professional who leads his company's customer experience efforts based on a clearly stated mission: to deliver remarkable client experiences consistently. Mark Slatin is a Senior Vice President and Director of Client Experience at Sandy Spring Bank, which is based in Olney, Maryland. Sandy Spring Bank has been in business for 151 years. That's unbelievable. And they're also a two-time winner of the CX Innovation Award. And he is going to talk to us about the creative approach to keep all the employees of the company synchronized with all of their CX efforts. Mark, welcome to the CX Leader Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Steve, and really appreciate being on, and it's just an honor for me to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you here, and particularly we're in a series here of best practices, and I can't think of a better one than what you've created there at Sandy Spring Bank. Why don't you just, for the perspective of our listeners, just give us a little more background on your organization and give some of the facts and figures just so we can put that in context for everybody.
All right, great. Happy to. Our bank started 151 years ago in 1868, just after the Civil War. We were a bank that was started by local farmers and merchants in the area who didn't trust the big banks in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. to meet their needs, so they started their own in the community. And still 151 years later, we're still here serving the community, expanded a little bit larger than we were before. Now we're at $8.3 billion in assets. We have over 50 community offices and 6 financial centers in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And we continue to grow and continue to focus on what makes us different, which is the way we deliver the experience to our clients.
And still privately owned?
No, we are traded on the NASDAQ. We're publicly owned now.
Okay. And about how many employees do you have?
We have probably about 950 or so employees.
And how long have you been with the bank?
Just over 6 years. And
just again, for the benefit of our listeners, can you just give us a brief highlight version of your career and how you ended up being a CX professional?
Sure. It's a long and winding road.
That's one of the things we've found with almost all of our CX professionals is nobody really trained for this.
Yeah, that is so true. A lot of it's on-the-job training.
Yeah.
I spent most of my career in sales and sales management, working in the corporate world first in California, in Southern California, then in Maryland. And about 12 years ago, I went to started my own private consulting firm and work with small to medium-sized businesses, helping them to grow their revenues. And at that point, I joined another small consulting outfit, a management consulting firm. And one of the largest clients we had was Sandy Spring Bank. So I consulted to the bank as an external management consultant for about 3 years. And then a little over 6, maybe 7 years ago, the CEO was interested in pulling in an internal resource to drive the CX program at the bank. And so after working on the outside for several years, different consulting projects, I became a member of the team and headed up the client experience efforts.
Awesome story. It is true how so many of our CX professionals today have really come up through different tracks, but something about their passion or their talents have emerged to create this profession we have. Why don't you talk a little bit about your program and then how Meeting in a Box originated? And just, I don't think meeting in a box is a common term for people, so give a little description of that. I think it ought to be a common term going forward.
Well, the funny thing about the name of it is that we had this idea. We had a problem we were trying to solve, and that problem was, okay, we do experiences well most of the time for our clients, but not all the time. And our CEO had received these suggestions at the time. They were on postcards from clients that were out in our branch network. And most of the time they were good, but every now and then from one place we would get a feedback that wasn't so great from a client. And he was just really interested in closing that gap and figuring out how we can drive consistency. And there were going to be many different initiatives over the last 6 or 7 years that we put into place. But this particular one was an acknowledgement that we had well-meaning people working really hard, but doing their own thing, working in silos, missing the target as far as some of the clients were concerned. And Meeting in a Box was originally started out as a concept to put something in front of every single department of the bank on a consistent basis, in this case monthly, and it was going to be centrally developed but locally administered. So it had a consistent message across all of our business units, and we have different lines of business. Oftentimes those people don't talk to each other, and our goal was to make sure we were consistently marching toward our principles, our values, and delivering consistently remarkable services to our clients.
Well, now you mentioned that this really was generated from a desire from the CEO, so that's a common theme we have, sort of top-down mandates. And then I think it's really interesting that you conceived it centrally and designed it centrally, but then somehow you collaborated with the operating units to make sure it was implemented properly. How was that received?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we really didn't assume that it was going to be adopted very well, very easily at first. I meant to go back and say the name Meeting in a Box was a working name for this project, and then we kind of ran out of time when the folks who do the graphic design needed a name so they could design the box, and I said just use Meeting in a Box. So they literally put the word Meeting in a Box on this probably 12 by 10 inch plastic poly box with 2 latches on it and a handle on top and 12 plastic or poly tabs inside, and we distributed 100 of those to every department in the bank. And we had a video with the CEO of the bank endorsing this, introducing it. I did a video introducing it. We went around, and where we had public forums, we shared what was coming and why it was coming. And then what essentially it turned out to be in terms of application was a 20-minute module that would be used to augment some team monthly meeting. So we're not trying to add additional meeting to the schedule, but just to give about a 15 to 20-minute component that would focus on CX or EX, employee experience topics. And I would say initially it was adopted by those people. You can kind of split up your organization maybe into thirds, right? The top third, excited, get it, love anything new, want to support the initiative. A third in the middle that are kind of, if I believe in it or if it fits my needs or if my manager is really going to force me to do it, I'll do it. And then the last third who are going through the motions or really just outwardly reject it. And that's kind of what we experienced. We had probably, 30%, 40%, what I would call very anecdotally, but very adoption. And then we had to continue to let them know that it wasn't the fad of the day, that it wasn't like any other thing that was going to come and go away if they just hung on long enough. So we used it to we built a pipeline that would be used to communicate, in some cases, 2 ways, out and then back. And over a period of time, I would say adoption continued to grow. And today we probably, if I had to say again, it's only anecdotally, but I would say probably we're in the 80% adoption rate.
How long has this been in place?
I would say probably now coming right up on 5 years.
Okay, so this was something you put in place pretty quick after you arrived at the bank.
Yes, it was probably right at the end of the first year.
Good. Well, you said a lot there, and I want to unpack a couple things there. When you talked about the third,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of reminded me of one of the best management lessons I ever heard about change management, is that the real job of the leadership is to keep the bottom third away from the middle third.
I like that.
And it sounds like you did some of the right things, like not making it something extra to do. You built it back into kind of what they were already doing. From my experience in this, the kind of the concept that customer experience is a fad or it's going to come and go makes no logical sense, since the only way to have a really successful business is to have happy customers who want to pay for your value and want to come back. So kudos to you for that. And it does sound, I think you're also being realistic that now after 5 years you've got 70 to 80%. So I think that's that speaks to how long some of these things take.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, just you got to be persistent. You got to believe in what you're putting forward. If it's not good content, then you need to change it. But it does start from the top down. You need, we did a couple of these meeting boxes at the beginning with just the executive team, just the top level people, and say, okay, like we're doing one this month, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be what's getting in the way of you delivering remarkable experiences. What's behind that? Like, what's the root cause of those obstacles? Let's brainstorm some solutions. Let's come up with some quick wins. And let's talk about some things that will require, more discovery or a strategy going forward. Those are things, there's no reason in the world why every department of the bank shouldn't be asking those questions, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's just one example. There's so many. We've done now probably over 50 over the 5 years or so of these, and the topics have varied. I mentioned that we started from the top down, and we did meeting in a box activities with the executive team where I facilitated so they could get a sense of what we're asking them to endorse in their organizations. But then later on, about 3 years ago, we started a group of folks we called experienced champions in the organization. And these are lower level people who work throughout the organizations, who just wanted to help the bank and volunteer their time in addition to their quote unquote day jobs to be part of this. We had 28 in the first group and 18 in the last group who are now graduates of that program. Part of that program is we teach them how to facilitate and present, and then they are responsible for facilitating their team's meeting in a box. So they took that over from their manager, which they love to do because it's great experience for them. And it helps us tremendously because we have, what I like to say is in the organization, we have 950 or so employees. We're looking for 950 light bulbs to go on. And everyone who's been through the Experienced Champions program has a light bulb turned on for sure. That was a bottom-up approach to complement our top-down original push to get this out.
My guest on the podcast this week is Mark Slatin. He's the Senior Vice President and Director of Client Experience at Sandy Spring Bank, a 151-year-old publicly traded bank. And Mark's CX program is got a very simple mission, and that's to deliver remarkable client experiences consistently. This is part of our Best Practices series. And if you are listening and you are a CX professional, you're getting an MBA on how to drive culture change over some period of time. We just were discussing the transition of ownership for the account from senior leadership and kind of the hierarchical managers into what you call the experienced champions. I think that I saw a great YouTube video that's out there, and we might want to even put that up on the website when we post this, because it's a great little video that you have out there. But I know you ran a bulletin board competition. Could you talk about that as sort of an engagement activity?
Sure. That was probably toward the end of the first year of Meeting in a Box. And the idea was, again, to make it active and live, and this idea of centrally developed but locally administered, so that they could personalize it to what's applicable in their department. And so the Remarkable Bulletin Board contest is we did the same thing. We printed probably, I don't know, maybe 80 of these bulletin boards that were branded, so they looked clean and professional, but that you could write on with a dry erase marker if you wanted to post something on paper up there. And it was like, what are my team's inspirations? What are our aspirations? This month's Meeting in a Box, what are our key takeaways? And so each team had those. We had a contest. We had a pizza party with the CEO and another executive, and we actually had two different winning teams. But at the end of the day, what was really the winner was that we really gained awareness and exposure of client experience, and got more and more people engaged because we had this contest and people were competing. Some folks came up with really interesting images. One team came up with the logo for their individual department. Somebody spent a lot of time on developing it, and then they put them on all their cubicles. But there were some other more meaningful results that came out of it, and some folks used that board for quite some time. So it was just a tool that we used, again, to help spread the message.
I know the objective and the mission of the program is to deliver remarkable client experiences consistently, but now 5 years in, could you talk about the impact that it's had on your customers?
I think one of the things that we've really done a good job on is breaking down some of the silos that existed in the bank. And through some of the meetings that we've had and other initiatives that we've had, we are doing a much better job of working together across divisions, across business lines, of recognizing that it is the client that should be the center of all of our interests and our activities. So I'll give you two examples of how Meeting in a Box, we use that as an outlet to break down some of these silos. One of the activities we have was what we call the team exchange. What I love about it is it's so simple that really any organization can do it. And we could have done it, but we just never did it. So we asked each team in the bank to pick another team, another department that they often work with, and just get together socially to meet each other in person. We're only across 3 states, so there's no reason we can't physically get together. And they did, and we've now done. Last month was our 5th one in about a 3.5-year time period. And 2 teams get together, they learn about each other, and all of a sudden it's no longer this person on the other end of an email. It's Joanne, who also likes dogs, or Henry, who also likes horses or has 2 kids, and now this is a human being. So the team exchanges were one way that we really help break down some of the silos. We had something called Walk in Their Shoes workshops, where we mixed in people from all over the bank to do a role play. And the whole idea of the role play was we had a client, we had a bank employee, and we had an observer, and they would rotate. But what we did was we put people in the shoes that they would not normally be in their day-to-day job. And just to get the sense of what it's like to be in the other person's shoes. And that was another cool activity. We had 37 workshops. We had every employee in the bank go through that. And breaking down silos is really critical for the client.
Mark, you've obviously had a great story here with over the past 5 years, but what are some of the later learnings or some of the things that you're just discovering now, and how is that going to impact the program going forward?
What we were missing, Steve, I think as we evolved to this year, is a systematic way to take the insights of what we learned and put those into action. And that's what we restructured this year. We created a client insights team to complement already existing employee experience team. And then above them created a strategy team, which includes the CEO. And so the client insights team are cross-functional, but they take the intelligence that we get from the market, from our clients, from feedback, from internal operational data, and make recommendations for what we need to go do about it. And then the strategy team would then approve it or move it to wherever else it needed to go. So now we have a systematic way to manage these as projects that we didn't have early on while we were still building the thing. And I think a bunch of good ideas that don't go anywhere you can start to lose some confidence. So it's really important to think through how things are going to work through the system to get put into action. And I don't mean just one or two things, I mean a systematic way.
So you're using your cross-functional team even to mine insights out of your data sets.
Well, the insights team they are cross-functional, but they have full-time jobs, but their job is to sit down and take, okay, so the clients are telling us this, these are the insights, what do we need to turn into a project? Why are you prioritizing this as you present it to the strategy team? So their job is to take those insights and recommend action. And they're cross-functional because we don't want them to be, lobbying for their silo.
Hey, Mark, we've come to my favorite part of the program, and I call that take-home value, and you have given us a cornucopia of change management thoughts and ideas, but if I'm a CX professional out there and I'm listening to this podcast, if you could just boil it down to one or two of the best tips that you have, and I now get it that Meeting in a Box is really just become the category for your CX program and how you drive that change through the organization. But again, if I'm very new in the journey, say like you were 6 or 7 years ago, what would be your tip, or what should people do first?
Well, I think the first thing, it's kind of cliche now, but it requires top-down commitment. So it's really important to develop relationships with as many people at the very top of the organization that you can, starting with the CEO. And don't underestimate the power of lunch. Everybody does have to eat, and people are usually willing to sit down and break bread with you. There's an opportunity to just focus on building the relationship and understanding what's most important to that individual executive. That said, as you go through the evolution, one of the things that I really learned, especially over the last year and a half or so, is over time, it needs to evolve from a top-down led initiative to a distributed model. And that requires some people outside of yourself and continually asking the question, how are you feeling about how we're structured on this journey? Do we have the right people where we need them to be? And do we need to be restructuring somehow or re-emphasizing who's driving it now? Because you go through these different phases where you would like to, in my case, you would like to have all the most senior people involved, and we had them involved, but really that was not where the organization needed to go anymore. We needed people at the middle management level and even at the lower levels of the organization, and have them carry the torch. And that was, I feel like I probably lost a lot of time by not realizing that sooner.
Mark Slatin is a Senior Vice President and Director of Client Experience at Sandy Spring Bank, based in Olney, Maryland, a 151-year-old financial institution, and he's been a great guest on the podcast this week. Mark, thank you again for being on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, and just in case our listeners might want to try to network with you, are you on LinkedIn by any chance?
I absolutely am.
Are you at Mark Slatin?
I am.
If you want to talk about anything you heard on the episode or about how Walker can help your business customer experience, you can contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. at +1 317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts, and you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and now we're on our own YouTube channel as well. Simply go to walkerinfo.tv to listen. And if you haven't heard, Walker was named the Qualtrics 2019 CX Partner of the Year. You can learn more about that by going to walkerinfo.com/x4. Thank you for listening to the CX Leader Podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.